Hey, Brainiacs, good morning, or good whenever you're listening to this. It's me, Dwight, here to host some more fascinating, fun guests today, and a pretty cool announcement. As far as the guests go, I'm glad to welcome the boys from the Reels of Justice podcast, which is a movie critique podcast with a really cool bent, and that is a lot of fun. We're going to talk about that. You can go back in their archive or their playlist and see where I was able to be an episode and come on and be a sort of faux defense attorney standing in place of certain movies, defending them against the charges of being a bad movie. We'll get more into it. They each have come in as film critics and film experts, have come in with suggestions of some movies that depict mental health in interesting, humorous maybe, and useful ways to help conceptualize mental health issues. As we talked about that, we also got into a really interesting discussion about media critique and also the ways to discuss things of which you disagree, even on social media or in podcasting, in ways that are intelligent and even-handed and, hey, even fun, as a matter of fact. So one quick announcement. There's going to be a little more detail about this during the episode, during the break. I'm going to share a little bit more with you about this. I have had a sponsor join the fray here at the Broken Brain. So Three Rivers Training, which is an outfit created by Carol Miles, licensed clinical social worker of Louisiana. She is an expert in the use of EMDR, which, if you don't know, is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. We've talked about it on the show before. You've heard Chris Revel, a friend of the show and occasional co-host and guest, to come on and talk about his own experience, as well as others, talking about how EMDR has helped out with trauma and helped them to process things to where their daily functioning is nowhere near as much a struggle as it was once before. And so I'm really excited to have Three Rivers join as a sponsor. You'll hear more details about their upcoming trainings in EMDR at the break. So for now, let's get into the Reels of Justice. Super pumped to have you on.
Yeah,
hey, happy to be here.
This is going to be cool.
And you were lucky because my rule generally is if the host isn't there after 7 minutes, I drop.
Nice.
That is usually
that's how I did exactly 7, didn't I? Sorry about that.
That's the worst, actually. They just make it.
Yes, and you think that you could do something else.
Exactly. You're just about to reclaim your meeting time back. I'm talking about work meetings. So these are the jokes, folks.
Right.
I got a tight 8 minutes on this.
You could in college, right? You could write your name on the board after 15 minutes. Did anyone?
Yeah.
Well, no, I was going to ask if anyone
yeah.
went to college. No, I'm just kidding. But I was going to ask if,
but like I would write all my friends' names on the boards too, even if they didn't show.
That's what happened. I remember that happening where someone's like, hey, write my name if they're not here in a few minutes. It's like, okay.
Yeah, man.
These guys all have the same handwriting, right?
my school was
here, just
not that strict. Like sometimes we'd go, I'd leave. We had one professor. He never would. Every once in a while, he just wouldn't show up, and I'd walk up to his office. He'd be in his office. I'm like, you forgot about our class again? Yeah, that was Professor Cobbledit. It was great guy though.
I'm glad to have the Reels of Justice joining today. That's your names when you're together, anyway. The Reels boys, the Get Reels, the Four Reels. I don't know what you call yourselves when you're out there cruising.
We're only 3/4 of a reel, though. Ryan,
Ryan Luis Rodriguez couldn't make it, but he sent his best. He sent us.
That's
but not his best then.
Let's go around and introduce yourselves to the friendly people.
I'll let our intrepid leader go first.
Dylan?
We said Ryan's not
Dylan. Dylan, go first.
All right. This is Dylan Schlender as the host prime of Reels of Justice.
He hosts the Reels of Justice.
Hey, it says so in a book.
It does.
I'm just a normal dude. We watch movies. We put them on trial. Happy to be here on the Broken Brain podcast with our main man, Dwight.
You pick up heavy stuff. Why don't you tell them about how much you can pick up?
Don't want. Well, I guess so. Keeping in theme, I've my max is about a little over 320 right now but it's always for 5 reps. But that's not important right now.
Okay.
I think it is.
I don't know.
That's true.
I assume that's good. Is that good? I don't know. I'm out.
It is
Pretty good.
My left arm's a little shorter. My deadlift and squat are much more impressive. Well over 500 for 5 reps. No, but I guess in more keeping with what the show's about too, the Broken Brain podcast here, I've have some experience with therapy and processing trauma, so it should make for a good conversation today.
Great. Thank you.
I'll let Big Ben go now as our
Hi, I'm Ben Haslar.
treasurer.
I'm a computer programmer by day and film
Crime fighter by night.
No, film prosecutor by night on the Reels of Justice. And yeah, I had the pleasure of going against Dwight twice on that show for Constantine and Avengers: Age of Ultron. So yeah, it's fun to be over on the other side of things.
Yeah, and Ben is the bailiff too. So if you're always wondering who that Scottish guy is, that's Ben.
That's what I was going to ask.
That outrageously racist.
when I was on, it was you guys use Zencaster, and I didn't see the video. Just heard, and I didn't catch which sound wave warbled when someone was Scottish. So I was wondering who was the bailiff. So there you go.
Well, he also sends his best, but he's not with us today either.
Maybe he'll make a surprise appearance later.
Oh, I hope so.
Where's your hat?
You say racist, just inherent to faking a Scottish accent? I've never heard you say anything.
Stereotypical, I should say. Like very
stereotypical.
Not out the box, very.
just making sure. I was like, I may have missed a few episodes. I didn't.
Willie from The Simpsons, basically.
Yeah. There you go.
And I'm Robb Maynard, aka Maynard Bangs, aka the Funky Unky. Lots of people say it actually. You don't know that. And I'm also a member of the Reels of Justice. It was an idea I had a few years ago. Kind of tested out on a different podcast. That podcast went under, so we decided to kind of spring off on our own and do it our own thing. It was kind of briefly mentioned.
To its cheers.
Yeah, but if you don't know, we take a movie, we invite a guest on to either defend or prosecute it in a mock courtroom. The rest of us play the jury and the judge, and the other. Thank you. Unky is Unkie. Please.
Oh no,
that is.
I tried changing it to Funky Unky, but I misspelled it. My bad.
Exactly. There you go.
I was curious about how you had come up with the idea of the show. Yeah, because where you're putting movies on trial. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just an idea one day. I don't know. I don't know what inspired it, but I had it for a while and I sat on it for a while. And then the other podcast kind of ran out of steam and ideas. It was a Mystery Science Theater 3000 fan podcast, and they weren't making any new content for a couple of years there. So there was really nothing to talk about. And so I was like, well, let's do this. It could be fun. It lets us talk about bad movies. It's kind of in the same wheelhouse. But the podcast kind of died out anyway once COVID started, which is weird. Everyone was home more, but we always recorded locally.
That's kind of why we started to seem like, hey, something to do.
Yeah. But we always recorded that podcast. We always went into the studio together. We all pretty much all lived in Denver, and we would all actually get together every week and spend time and touch and hug. But once COVID started, we stopped doing that. We weren't allowed to hug. And then
There's that court order too.
Yeah. So for some reason, being at home just made a lot of people lost interest in doing it. So
Maynard has to maintain a 5-state distance from me by law now.
That is true. That's not my requirement, you registered. So
I did.
Yeah. So that's the origin of the show. And we pick on a different movie pretty much every week, but what's nice is you get both sides, right? You have to have a defender. So no matter how bad the movie is, someone has to come on and say something nice about it, as nice as they can. So I don't feel like we bully anything. Every movie gets its own fair shake, and both sides are represented to the
in
best
100% capacity, which makes it fun. One person's 100% for or against.
Well, and it's funny because even with it being a comedic backdrop in a way, and it is a lot of fun, having been a defense attorney now on there twice, it was a lot of fun to come on and defend. and make the case. And if anything, I may have overshot the prep because I came in with like pages of notes, and I was like,
we have pages of notes.
I'll be honest, I came in, I'd listened to some of the people on your show, including you guys, and the way the prep and the quotes and the things you guys put into everything. I was like, I got to be ready. I was very nervous the first time. So
you did great though. It was so much fun. It was a good one.
But one of the things I really do like about it is that if you're going to make a podcast, a movie podcast now, you have to have an idea. It seems like, just because there's so many. I mean, you don't have to, but I know people who I hear of people and see them posting on like podcast forums and things where they say, I started this group and this podcast, and it's about movies and nobody's really listening. And it's like, well, it's another one where there's just a bunch of people and they're not putting anything into it. And so if there's creativity and cleverness or a certain way to have a take on it, one of the things that is big is kind of to your point, which is the bullying culture around things that people like and how angry people get about these kinds of things. One of the things I really like about yours is we go in knowing, we're going to argue about this movie, but one of you by assignment is going to be pro and one of you by assignment is going to be con. There's a little bit of choice, right? But you could say, like when you
Not for Ryan. Yeah. We assign things to Ryan. Yeah, because he would take nothing. He would defend Paddington 2 every week. It's like, no, Ryan, you have to defend a bad movie.
I eventually vote.
The hard part is finding someone to prosecute. Wait, I have someone in the wings to prosecute. You probably did Paddington 2, didn't you?
We did do Paddington 2.
Head-to-head.
Put it up against Shrek 2.
Oh wait, I did hear that one. That was a terrible. Anyway, that was a terrible miscarriage of justice, I think.
Ben,
it's my fault.
It was Ben's fault. It was Ben's fault.
Not to rehash.
And you now
no one said Paddington 2 was bad. It was just maybe not as good as Shrek 2. We were really sleeping on Shrek 2.
Professor Black just put on a hell of a case. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's it too. Sometimes the arguments are great,
and that is the fun thing is you do evaluate it by the case. I felt like I squeaked by on one of mine. I don't want to spoil it for anyone if they want to go listen to my appearances, but I felt like one of them I was like, wow, they went for that. That was really cool.
It always feels really close too. And I think when you have a jury of 3, trying to convince any 3 of us to agree on anything is so difficult. It's so hard to get us to, because we all look for completely different things in movies. Like I like movies with dinosaurs. And that's a very basic baseline for me. Stick a dinosaur in your movie and I'm good. But other people like interpersonal relationship stuff and not as much into it.
What was the one with Whoopi Goldberg where she was a cop and her partner was a dinosaur?
Theodore Rex.
Theodore Rex. There you go.
Excellent movie.
That will end up on the show one day.
Excellent movie.
That has both. They have a relationship, right? I mean, they're partners and friends.
That's when you get to that next level. Can you make an interpersonal relationship with a dinosaur?
This is groundbreaking. This is groundbreaking. Where Theodore Rex was referred to as the next level in cinema.
Exactly. That's what leaves all the interpersonal relationship movies about 2 people behind in the dust. Like anyone can have an interpersonal relationship with a human. Have one with an anthropomorphic dinosaur. Now who dances?
I think there's a whole genre that we want to steer clear of. We're getting dangerously close to. But I wanted to ask, while we're talking about that, we're going to talk about the use of mental health in films, and you guys are specifically going to talk about some movies that you picked. But while we're talking a little bit about the format of your show, I was curious. You guys probably select people pretty carefully so that you don't have this on the show, because I've never really seen it bleed into your show, but the sort of toxicity of fandom nowadays, or how much people want to get on the internet and like I say, get so angry or fight to the death about, Star Wars is kind of one of the classic worst offenders that you get such a toxic overtones. How do you guys stay? I don't know. Do you guys have to try to stay away from that in your show and edit for it?
The guests that we bring on are almost exclusively creators. Not really fans, so we have people in the film industry, we have writers, we have historians, we have musicians, other podcasters. So a whole litany, but it's usually people who create. And I think they just tend to be less single-brained Nimrods than the sort of toxic corner of the internet.
Well, and I think with the toxicity too is it just wouldn't really fly in court, right? Like if you wanted to,
the judge could put a kibosh on it.
Yeah, if you wanted to bring that into the court, and just using Star Wars as an example, this isn't how I feel personally, but if you want to say, oh, Ray's a Mary Sue, and you can't rest on that, show us, prove it, and not only prove it true. Why does that make the movie bad? So that toxicity, it could seep in, but you'd really have to back it up. And if you can't back it up, the jury's not going to listen to you.
And you've got a defense attorney who's literally there to shut you down.
And they'll shut you down if you try to do it. It's
and they're going to start bringing up all the examples of, I can't remember what the male Mary Sue is, but Luke
Skywalker.
Wesley,
exactly. Luke Skywalker's one, and so you could shut it down. You'd shut it down pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, or you get them into a corner where they just have to admit that all Star Wars is bad, which is probably where I'm landing.
See, trying to get a take in here. It just feels like so much is accelerated in social media to where people are very quickly at each other. And so one of the things that in all seriousness I really like about your show is it is an exercise in structured communication.
Yes.
And just in your own thinking, at the same time you're doing it, you're also having fun with it. In a way that, I had to think about this and I should think about what I'm saying, and I can't just get away with any whatever bullshit I want to say, but I'm still having fun with it and rolling at the same time. And I think it's a good, it's a good model for how people should communicate, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, we've had guests on who have, we have guests on who have maybe controversial or like highly political statements outside of movies, but when you come on the show, it's all about movies, so it doesn't really matter. You can kind of switch the hat, as it were, and it's a level of civility that you usually don't see on social media, because social media is all about trying to inflame the passions and things and not slow things down and actually have that dialogue. And that's what we're bringing to the table. We're really healing American discourse one movie at a time.
Nice. That's a T-shirt right there. You should make.
I know. I was just going to say that's
healing American.
Somebody writing that down. I'm just.
No, but I really appreciate you picking up on that, Dwight, because it is something that the show really strives for. It's like we really do want to have a good conversation about movies. An episode we just recorded, we did Spider-Man 3, and that's such a 50-50 movie for people, right? And I think the discourse that we had about that movie, some of the best that you'll find on the internet when that comes out. So anyone,
and I'll say this, anyone who hates Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, listen to our episode on Crystal Skull, and you're going to come out of the movie just thinking about the movie differently. I bet you'll want to go rewatch the movie and go, okay, this still sucks and this still sucks, but this is good and this is good. And we don't need to throw away. I think that's one thing is, and maybe this is because, maybe this was the origin, because I was part of this Mystery Science Theater fandom. There's such a quick way to just just push these movies away and go, these are garbage. And for me, it was kind of like, no, there's a good nugget in there. Like, like Manos Hands of Fate is a terrible movie, but there's a good idea down in there. And there were people who worked really, really hard to make it and tried their very, very best compared to people who are pumping out movies in Hollywood now and don't give a damn what they put out and don't put any effort or love into it. You compare it to that, and I can't just go, oh, this movie is garbage, it should have never been made. I want to stab my eyes out. I go, there's a boring movie, but there's a great idea down there in the end. And I think that's the toxicity you're talking about in film, Twitter in general. Like Morbius is really boring, but I didn't want to die.
Well, that's a low bar, but sure.
And you know what? On the flip side of that, too, something I think we do well on our show is there's a big movement online to like rehabilitate all sorts of movies. And some of those movies are still really bad. And so we'll settle that in court. It's like it became very fashionable to say, oh, Halloween 3 is actually the best Halloween. And it actually is riddled with plot holes and doesn't make any sense. And it's not particularly well acted. So that would be a great one to do on the show. But like that's just something that you see. So sometimes people want to rehabilitate a movie like Hudson Hawk, for example. We had a great guest come on to talk about Hudson Hawk. And it's like, you know what? I get that people want to. Yeah, I really like. I get that people want to
hang up button ready here.
No. I just say I'm just saying.
just
So,
kidding.
like,
go ahead.
you want to
I'm just-
rehabilitate Hudson Hawk.
Yeah.
You want to say it's a cult classic now or something. But at the end of the day, it's still bad,
Well,
so
yeah,
we,
but that's-
we do push back against that.
Another
which I like.
thing, too, if for people who haven't heard the show, we're trying to determine if the film is guilty of being a bad movie, which is a subjective idea.
Right.
Week to week, our definition of bad movie changes. That's why
the
it's
thing that
funny.
I think.
That's why it's funny we're a court. Like, how
Yeah.
do you objectively prove something subjective? You
Yeah.
can't. It's ludicrous. It's hard. And it's like some days we're just really bleeding heart, and then some days we're really hard ass. So trying to, trying to get a balance is really hard. And
There are some movie podcasts that if I look at the title of the episode, and if they're talking about a movie that I like, even if I'm aware, I know Hudson Hawk. Okay, I know Hudson Hawk, but I still love it. But I know. I mean, I get it. But I enjoy it. But still, I'm aware. I'm not in the dark. But if I see that one pop up on a handful of podcasts that I listen to most of their episodes, if that one pops up, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to that one because I have a little special place in my heart for that particular bad movie. And it's going to be sad. I'm going to get sad at some point or feel made fun of at some point if I listen to it. If I listen to yours, though, I don't feel that way. For me, it's like the experience of when I learned that, I'm going to say it wrong because I always do, Mission Impossible 2 was a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's fill in the blank. It's not To Catch a Thief. It's his other one. I always say To Catch a Thief, but it's...
his other one. He has like 60 movies.
Yeah,
Torn
so many
Curtain.
movies.
the
was
one
Topaz.
where-
A Foreign Correspondent.
I
Was it
can't
North
think
by
of
Northwest? Was it?
The Man Who Knew Too Much.
I'm going to...
Man, he did do a lot of espionage features.
39
didn't he?
Steps.
Mission Impossible. No,
Sabotage.
It was another one with Cary Grant.
Saboteur.
That's why I always...
Could be To Catch a Thief then.
What happens in Mission Impossible 2 anyway?
Not much.
That's not the one where he does the
drops down
rope
another ceiling again.
He does another scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 6 minutes of him descending from
It's
a
not
ceiling.
very good, but it is a remake of Alfred. Okay, rejoining from the edit. Those of you that are listening to the edited,
No edits, baby. Just
version.
go in.
Notorious.
People want it
Notorious.
raw.
Notorious
Yeah.
is a good one. Yeah,
Mission
yeah,
Impossible 2 is a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious, and I know that because Michael Deniston, who is a prolific movie podcaster on his own, had invited me on his show. It was with remakes, where we're talking about remakes, and that was one I didn't know was a remake. So I saw Mission Impossible 2 in the theater, hated it, never watched it again, and then when he contacted me, said, "Hey, do you want to be on here? But watch Mission Impossible 2 and then watch Notorious. It's a remake of." And I said, "What?" And so I watched both of those, and it was actually very interesting to watch it, even though I didn't really necessarily like it a whole lot more. So getting an insight into something, like you said, somebody was trying something, and I could respect it in a different light because somebody was trying to do something kind of new and different and just injecting Ethan Hunt into this as if he was Doctor Who appearing in the TARDIS in an already ongoing adventure or something. But so appreciation for the way people see things is pretty cool. Hi, y'all. The American Psychological Association defines EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, as a structured therapy helping people to overcome trauma by focusing on trauma memories while simultaneously experiencing bilateral stimulation. And that can mean moving eye movements most typically. It is an evidence-based treatment that helps people to process trauma and even to get results in a very short amount of time. And I'm really excited to announce that we are partnering with 3 Miles Training to share some information about their upcoming EMDR training for mental health professionals. So if you have been putting it off or just not sure how and when to learn about that, well, you've got an opportunity coming up. It's the Phase 1 training is going to be held September 7th through 9th, and I will be joining you as a student in that training as well as having them be a sponsor of the program. So very excited to have you join. Go to carolmiles.com and click on trainings to learn more about that and to register. Hopefully see you in September, and pay attention here at the program for other upcoming trainings from Three Rivers Training. Before we get into the specific films that you guys wanted to share, what are some of your thoughts just about mental health depiction in movies? Historically, mental health has always been depicted in movies in a very respectful, subtle way. Has been my experience. I paused there for a second. You can go ahead.
As is the case with Dylan's selection.
So, yeah.
Well, no, mine is actually a good selection for that. That's why. But that's why
I wanted
rare.
to start, because obviously, mental health is one of those things that
I think it's a mirror, though.
It's usually just associated with you crazy, like someone who's just like out of step with society. It's because of their mental health. They're crazy. That's why they hurt people. That's why they live in their van or whatever it is. So it could be something pretty benign or something extreme, but it is usually painted, negatively.
I think it's a mirror to the society.
Health. Right. Yeah.
I think it's a mirror to society. I think society is like that, right? They see people who are out of the ordinary, especially if we're talking about movies from a certain time period where sort of any deviation from the norm or lack of conformity, you were tossed away, you were othered, you were alienated. And I think the movies just reflect that. And I don't think it's an agenda they're pushing, but it's like, well, this is how audiences are going to think about it. So this is how we'll depict it.
Yeah, but bringing it up as a mental health issue in a movie, that's just shorthand, for like the crazy, like if you're seeing a shrink or something, So
Are we allowed to call them shrinks? Is that
Dwight? You're a shrink, right?
Well, I just have a master's degree though, so I don't know if I count as a shrink. No, people call me that sometimes, just on the street, right before they throw something at me. It's hard. No, I'm just kidding. I have had clients that call me that before, just as a therapist, but it's all melded together now. It used to mean a psychoanalyst was a shrink, which is the old school, which is an interesting wrinkle in when you show mental health in movies. I'm always fascinated because of working as a therapist of all the ways therapists are depicted in movies. And you're right. It's oftentimes a therapist, unless they are the main character because the movie's about mental health, they usually are just a vehicle for, hey, look at this weird thing that happened to me, therapy. I had to sit there and this person was all weird. They're almost always depicted as the old school psychoanalytical. It's not helpful. It's kind of shown as almost as an off of humor.
Yeah, and I was just thinking too, think about how much film has really embraced like the Jungian style psychoanalyst, because almost every movie accepts dream interpretation, and that dreams mean something. They're all Freudian and Jungian that way. It's never what movie is just like, oh, here's a dream sequence that is just batshit insane. Can I say that? Just
sure.
crazy.
Insane.
Good. But it's just, here's a dream that's just completely off the wall and it means nothing. I mean, maybe The Big Lebowski has one, but like besides that, dream sequences always mean something to a character in the movies. So.
Yeah, and you're right. And oftentimes the mental health professional, I mean, you go to your actual therapist and say, so I had this dream. What does it mean? They're going to say, well, what does it mean to you? Let's talk about it. They're not going to go, oh, there was a sword. Well, that means this.
Yeah.
And, there was a sunset. Well, that means, ooh. It's never good when your therapist goes, ooh, like
hamburger was eating you. Wow.
No, but you're absolutely right, and it is interesting how that has influenced the way that we look at those things, of whether or not we look at therapy as something that, the weak comic relief character would go to therapy, or then again in more recent years we see that being done purposefully. But once again, unless mental health is the topic of the movie, it's not always represented in a way that's healthy, right?
I think we started to see the shift, and it wasn't even in a movie that did it, but it kind of ushered it in, was in The Sopranos. Tony Soprano going to therapy, even though he was a big tough guy, alpha male kind of thing. I think that kind of helped.
Analyze This did it first.
I don't know if that was that
all of The Sopranos is just a rip off of Analyze.
No, but I'm just saying. So I
analyze that.
I do think you start seeing that shift. I don't know if you're going to see anything. Like, you're not going to see like Captain America going to therapy though, or anything. I don't think you're going to get that with like.
I don't know. I think we're getting close to that. I think
he did go. He went to group therapy.
Oh, group therapy. Okay. All right.
Oh, don't. Fair. He's about to say group therapy doesn't count. Dwight, get him. He was about to say.
I wasn't going to say that.
Say group therapy.
I know, but I was thinking like, in my office here, like laying down on the couch, tell me about your mother kind of thing. That's not going to happen.
That's, however, does anybody watch Falcon and Winter Soldier? there's an extended conversation between Sam and Bucky, where Sam tells Bucky to go to therapy. They have where they have a whole big conversation about, basically it's about PTSD, racism, masculinity, about their own friendship, and he basically says you got it, because Sam, remember, is a volunteer social worker when he meets Captain America. So there's where that pro therapy stuff is worked in there, even in some.
I think when you look though at superheroes, they kind of don't work for that model, because like let's look at Batman.
Spider-Man too.
He needs therapy,
Batman
but he has a secret identity.
In the cartoons.
So I'm just saying, but how could he possibly be entirely open and honest with his therapist when he can't tell them that they're Batman?
It's his Lucius
Spider-Man
Fox,
2 has that, where he says, "In my dream, I'm Spider-Man and I'm losing my powers."
Yeah.
Yeah, Sharon, if you guys have ever heard, you can pretend you have if you haven't, but any of the episodes of my show where Sharon Blady comes on quite a bit. She's the former health minister in Manitoba. She's a mental health advocate and trainer, and also a big Marvel head like me. And so we do a lot of episodes about comics and movies, and we like to...
You did Moon Knight with, right?
Yeah. We talked about Moon Knight and dissociative identity disorder. Yeah. And we just recorded. I haven't put the Batman one up yet, but we always like to say, like, the Batman is like one good round of EMDR therapy from never becoming Batman, right? And so there is a story, and also let's be honest, there's something kind of sexy and appealing about the mental illness aspect of villainy, because you look at the Joker and his insanity and his unpredictability is part of that fascination, right? And so
he had a therapist.
Culture. Yeah.
The Joker had a therapist. It didn't go good for her.
Yeah.
Didn't
That's
end well.
true.
Joker was so mentally unhealthy, he made his therapist mentally unhealthy.
So you see that as depicted, and I think that there's always going to be an appeal on the one hand to go certain ways where it's like, I don't know, like, you showcase the cops on a cop movie who have action scenes every other day and shoot a bunch of people, but so by the same token, you don't show the mentally ill person who's like handling their health well and, moderating their emotions and regulating and taking their meds as they should. I get it. But on the other hand, I do know for sure that when I mentioned working with a schizophrenic client, that I had family members who said, "Oh, be careful." And when you get down to like, well, why be careful? I've known tons of schizophrenic people in my career. What are you like worried about? Oh, well, I saw this show where someone got stabbed, or I saw this one where that person was a murderer. And it does create a real sensation in our minds of how do we treat people or look at people. Whereas I think most people with schizophrenia are actually on average safer than any other average person that you'd pluck out of the regular populace. Right.
I think the reason you don't see those depictions though, is that the individual who goes to therapy and takes their medication and adjusts well and overcomes their mental health issues, they don't have a story to tell in a movie, right? Nothing happens. They went to the grocery store without incident. They went to work without incident. There's no movie to make. There's a million people who got bit by a radioactive spider and then died, and so there's no movie about them.
I want to read this article now about the real life radioactive spider epidemic of deaths. I like that idea. But no, absolutely. And I realize that that's true. That's where I go. And that's actually where we went in with the Moon Knight thing, is like to see, here's someone who's painted in a heroic light as an individual who, is a good guy and also has something that usually, if you have multiple personality problems in a movie, you're a serial killer, right? So that's a pretty one-track career guidance from the movie Career Guidance Advisors. So anyway, it's just interesting, those things. And by the same token, too, I was thinking about this morning, knowing we were going to have this conversation. And for the life of me, I can't remember. I mean, I'm sure with a lot of Googling, I could track it down. But there was some movie, and it might have even been a made-for-TV movie.
We need Ryan.
Oh, that...
Ryan is our walking IMDb.
And the only name person I can remember it was Nathan Lane. But there were three actors who were portraying mentally challenged individuals. So this was when I was a kid. that this movie was made, and it's probably one of those movies that back then would have been seen as progressive, and now would be seen as regressive and a little insulting to have these abled people, put on, depending on how their performance was. I don't have any idea if it was respectful. I can't remember, as a kid. You just had Memento pop up behind you. Anyway, so we're gonna go
Just
there in a
saw
second, right? So the interesting thing, though, when I look back at this movie in my mind,
was it The Boys Next Door?
It probably was. Yeah.
Jack Palmer is a social worker whose job is taking precedence over his personal life. Mainly, his job is to help 4 mentally challenged men live regular lives in a home.
Wow! Look at you, Schlender.
Oh,
He's
gosh.
not a walking IMDb, but he has access to IMDb.
I texted Ryan and he got it.
No.
Right. Hey, we brought him in. He's
Tell him I said hi.
Ryan on the line. Wow, thank you for that. I'll have to now see. So anyone who goes out there and Googles that movie, please don't hold it against me for any memories I have of it. I have no idea how respectful it was to the disabled or not, but I think the intention was to showcase these. And one of the gimmicks they did in this movie was they had each of the characters at one point is doing something that they can't really do in real life. Like Nathan Lane's character is wanting to go dancing with this girl, who his girlfriend, and he doesn't have like very good motor skill control. And so they do, but then it shows in his mind this great dancing scene that they do and how he's experiencing this the same as anybody else would. It was the intention. But one of the actors is supposed to give testimony in front of a local committee that's making some kind of funding decision. And they get up and he's almost nonverbal in the movie and can't really talk. But the way they decided to shoot this was they cut away from reality and kind of show him, and he's standing erect and he's dressed in this like nice suit and everything. And he gives this very just articulate presentation. So anyway, whatever you think of that decision, they made that decision to make the thing. The thing that stands out in my mind, though, as a very young kid, I think, you didn't say what year it came out, but I think I was young.
I could double check. I think it was 98.
Oh, I wasn't that young. Anyway, but I was probably a teenager or young teenager, I guess. But yeah. I remember that he, in this speech, he said, the way that a society treats those that are the least able to take care of themselves shows how we should judge that society. And that stuck in my head ever since then. And I can't say that it hasn't had something to do with the way that I've looked at the world. The fact that I've chosen to go into an industry that's a helping profession. I don't know that it made me do that for a living, but the attitude of we really should take care of people. And that's actually a core belief that not everyone shares. Right. And so to say that stood out to me as something important based off it was probably not a very good movie. So anyway, yeah.
No, that's beautiful that you're able to take that, though. That's excellent. That's a lovely sentiment.
Wow.
So not guilty.
Yeah.
Not guilty.
That was a fast one.
I know.
It wasn't.
You have to see these.
Charges.
We have to see these depictions of mental health first.
Yeah. I was going to say, let's not be so quick. Let's not be so quick.
Fair point.
Don't tweet at me for that.
I'm willing to cut Nathan Lane a lot of slack. He's very funny.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in. You guys are changing your backgrounds and getting into what movie do you want to share with everybody, and what does it mean to you, and how does it tie in with mental health? And let me see, 5 other questions. Ready, go.
Let's go to Schlenzo.
Oh, well, yeah, sure. I'll go first. So the movie I picked when you came to me, Dwight, and you said you want to talk about a movie with mental health aspects, it has to be Ordinary People, 1980, directed Robert Redford, the first movie he ever directed, starring Donald Sutherland, a young Timothy Hutton, and Mary Tyler Moore in some odd, at the time, that was almost kind of stunt casting, really, because she plays a very, very cold mother. She's not warm and bubbly at all like she was in like the Dick Van Dyke Show or anything like that. So this movie has so much going on in it. Basically, the premise is this family, which is Donald Sutherland, Timothy Hutton, and Mary Tyler Moore. They are grieving the loss of the eldest son. Timothy Hutton is just now out of a mental facility because he tried to kill himself. And that's where the movie starts off, is basically he's just out of there, and he starts to go to see a therapist played by Judd Hirsch. actually, from Taxi fame. And the scenes where Judd, it's kind of funny. Like, so Maynard was just talking about earlier about this whole Jungian thing with like analyzing dreams. That's one of the first things that Judd Hirsch says. He says, I don't put much stock in dreams. He goes, I don't put much stock in control, So the first scene with Timothy Hutton and Judd Hirsch talking with each other face to face, the first time they talk to each other is on the phone, but when they're talking face to face, he's kind of knocking out some of these myths about going to see his therapist and what the work you're actually doing is, because I think that's one thing. And I can say from my own personal experience with therapy, the first time I saw a therapist, I was really hoping he was going to say, oh, do these things and then you'll be fine. And then he talks to you and say, oh, no, you actually have to do a lot of work here. There's a lot of things that you have to do. And I'm just going to it's almost like more like a coach. Right. And that's basically what happens with Timothy Hutton's character working with Judd Hirsch's character. I mean, you get to see him become more comfortable and less guilt-ridden over the death of his brother, more accepting of his parents' emotions, and it's just such a beautiful movie. And every single character is treated with respect, everything they're going through. Unfortunately, Mary Tyler Moore's character is viewed as a bit of a villain in the movie, which is very unfortunate because she's processing just as much grief as everyone else. And so the character gets treated a bit unfairly, I think, when people talk about the movies, but that's starting to change. That conception is starting to change a bit. I think a lot of people are looking at her and realizing like, what, I don't know, she's in a tremendous amount of pain as well. And her feelings to her son are just incredibly complicated. You can't just say, oh, she hates him or doesn't love him. And that's one thing Judd Hirsch says to Timothy Hutton's character. He says, it's not that she doesn't love you. You just don't think she can love you enough, which is pretty powerful, because when you're dealing with losing a son almost killing himself, like how tightly can you hang on? Because she'd lose control, and she doesn't want to lose control. So she's a very complex character. And getting back to, how it relates to mental health, all these characters have their own way of dealing and processing this trauma. And it doesn't really have a happy ending, at the spoiler alert. I guess we could give you our spoiler warning for our show. We'll put it. I
was going to wonder if you're going to get into those.
Yeah. And it ends.
Yeah. Why don't we say it the way you just did, which is, here's the spoiler, hit the skip button, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So the movie ends with
spoil. Yeah.
Yeah. So the movie ends with Mary Tyler Moore basically leaving. She walks out on the family. She doesn't walk out on the family. She has a confrontation with Donald Sutherland, where Donald Sutherland is like, I don't know if I love you anymore, and I don't know if you ever loved me. And she says, I feel the same way about you I've always felt. And you could kind of tell, like, oh, wow, no, they haven't had a good relationship for some time now. And she ends up leaving. And there's just so much going on in this movie emotionally. And it's just anchored by those tremendous performances by, Hirsch, Hutton, Moore, and Sutherland. So if you want to see a movie that shows therapy in a positive light, in a way that it can help, in a way that it's practical, in a way that ordinary people can appreciate it, you got to watch Ordinary People. But you have to understand, it's still messy, it's still painful, and life it's still going to go on, whether you're getting help or not. And that's really what it's about.
There weren't answers at the end. Like, it's not like a panacea. Going to therapy didn't solve this kid, and now he thinks of the world in just this pure light. His mom's still the way she is. His dad's still the way, and the father too. It's a very revealing line at the end of the movie. Donald Sutherland finally snaps at Timothy Hutton, where he's otherwise been very, very nice, very collegial. The whole movie, he's very soft, and he snaps. And Timothy Hutton says, no, you should do that more often. And then the big reveal, just like you used to do to Buck, which was the name of the brother who died. So now you have to think about, well, did Donald Sutherland have an adversarial relationship with Bucky the same way Mary Tyler Moore has an adversarial relationship with Timothy Hutton? And it just added a whole nother layer in the last 2 minutes of the movie. And it was just very well executed.
And it's really interesting I have not seen this, but from what you're describing, it totally sounds like one that has a more realistic capturing of that, where the end of the movie is just the end of our window into these people's lives. That type of story where
exactly.
And I'm a fan. I think once in a while it's good to have some stories that tie off with a bow, and even some that are, but I think there is a risk there of having every story where people heal, they're all healed up by the end, right? And once again, you got to have some feel-good movies too. But, not every time a therapist says to you, it's not your fault, you crumble into a crying pile and then you're healed by the next day or whatever. Nothing, that's my little dig at Good Will Hunting that I give all the time. Good movie, don't get me wrong, good movie. But to say, there isn't a narrative arc to healing in that way, right? To say, at the end of this story being told, geez, I don't know what's going to happen with my parents, and my mom and I still have problems, and I still have problems, but I'm living still, and I'm still moving ahead with my life.
Yeah. That's God, I have so many favorite scenes in the movie, but one of them has to be when, so Judd Hirsch and Timothy Hutton's characters are talking, and they're talking about the time when Bucky died. It was a boat accident, and Timothy Hutton's character feels so guilty. And Judd Hirsch says to him, it's like, did it ever occur to you that you're the strongling, that you were stronger? Because he has this sense that he should have been the one to die. And he says the mistake was that he held on. But that's basically what the whole movie is about. It's like, you've got to hold on. And it's just beautiful. Like every scene in this movie is just beautiful and brilliantly done. I mean, it won 4 Academy Awards for good reason,
Thank you.
Well,
awesome.
Thank you for letting me talk about it. On our show, we usually have to talk about bad movies, or
That's right.
I'll talk about Charlie Bronson movies. So
No, we throw recommendations out at the end.
that's true.
No dinosaurs in that movie, though. Not a one.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear where yours comes in. Who's going to go next? I want to hear how you work.
I'll
with
let Big
dinosaurs.
Ben go. He's got at least one dinosaur.
Okay. Well, mine sort of breaks from what the other two picked, which is sort of actively about psychotherapy. But I listened to your Moon Knight discussion on your show, and that's kind of what led me to pick mine, which is Memento, which is about a guy who deals with short-term memory loss. So he can't form... He has like all of his old memories since an incident, but any new memories that he's forming, he loses almost instantly. What makes it, I think, interesting from a psychological perspective is the way Christopher Nolan shoots it, where it's out of sequence. So very often you're seeing things from the perspective of this character rather than, as you were saying, like, someone this disease is sort of weird and to the side. This is very much first person. You're with this guy. He'll find himself in a bathroom, have no idea why he's there, and like, oh, maybe I need to take a shower or something. And then later we find out, oh wait, he was actually trying to, jump a guy.
He was breaking into someone's house or something.
Right.
Someone's like, what are you in my shower? It's shot backwards, essentially, right? Yeah.
Well, it's shot forwards and backwards. There's two timelines, and then they meet in the middle.
Yeah.
So yeah. I request that we don't spoil it just in case anyone hasn't seen it, because I do know some people haven't. But I do think it does gain that sort of sympathetic understanding towards someone in that situation. And it's certainly not flowery, and the guy's not, his solution to things is not necessarily a good one. But it does give that perspective, I think.
And the thing that I like about that type of movie with mental health, in my opinion, is that you're taking somebody who has a certain let's say a certain psychological struggle or impairment or diagnosis or whatever, and you're putting them into a protagonist's seat in a noir situation. If I can say noir on this one, I don't know. Guys know how I love to label things noir.
It's sort of a crime
apparently.
thing. Yeah.
More of a crime. Okay. Crime adventure, whatever. But, you don't see someone like that as a kind of protagonist in a like crime detective-y kind of thing very often. And so that's what because traditionally,
I just want to say Dana Carvey's Blank Slate, Clean Slate.
Oh, God.
It was like 10 years before Memento.
I remember that.
Memento
man.
is just a ripoff of Dana Carvey's Clean Slate.
Didn't we? Oh man!
So,
This is one of I'm picking up on one of your the funky unky traits here that I really like, which is you're able to find something that predates that is worse than the thing being discussed.
worse. Clean Slate is excellent.
Clean Slate is pretty
Maybe
great.
I don't know. Maybe I might have dozed off.
He has
and
like a
forgotten
dog. It's like a dog sidekick.
I must have had amnesia where I forgot all the funny parts of that movie. But
It's always funny.
This is the to your point, I don't think that everybody every movie character doesn't have to be making good decisions. In fact, if they make only good decisions, it's not usually a very interesting story. So like you said, he's definitely a person, and he's not a person who is in the seat of, oh, look, I have this struggle and this movie is about my struggle. No, the movie's about this guy doing what he's doing in this crime fiction detective-y paradigm.
He's trying to find the guy who killed his wife.
Yeah.
And kind of caused his incident. Yeah.
Without being able to remember any new clues, which then makes it very interesting because he's a guy with a struggle who's doing a thing. And that's along the vein of something, let's say like Moon Knight or something like that, where you have to kind of change the realistic limitations of something to where, he does, for example, this guy Ritchie in this movie, his character does retain some things that what did I say? Guy Ritchie. Wow. That would be a whole different movie. But that would, he does retain some things that he really shouldn't because of his condition. He seems to have some things down if you're going to get there. But changing the limitations that we have in real life is something we do all the time with people who are neurotypical, right? And we give them enhanced abilities. So anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that type of story is cool because it's not just here's how this person became a villain, right? Here's how this person is doing this interesting thing that any other person might be doing in a movie. They just happen to also have short-term memory loss. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
And the way they shoot it, you get to kind of feel it with him, and it's kind of hard, in a visual medium to show people's mental health issues in a way that you can relate to them. So if you're actually just cutting the scenes and chopping it up, it's like, oh, he's just as lost as I am,
Yeah. And that sense of loss of control and things, there's ways that you can watch. I remember when I watched Memento to say, oh, wow, what would that be like? It did cause me to think those kinds of thoughts, which I think are healthy. So cool. Thank you.
I didn't care much for Memento because I watched all the scenes in backwards order.
No, I watched the chronological cut this morning. It's actually very interesting because you get to see more like on the other plot thread how people are taking advantage of him. They're wanting him to do things for him, and they're very terrible people for doing
that's
so.
That's another interesting thread in that movie that I won't go into for reasons that it might get into too much spoiling of the plot, but of how vulnerable even someone who's a big tough guy in a movie could be when they're taken advantage because people know what their condition is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a good point too. Yeah, I like that.
Interesting. Very good.
Tag Maynard.
Thank you. All right. Wow us.
Well, I've got What About Bob?
What about him?
I love it.
It's one of my favorite movies. So What About Bob stars Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. It's directed by Frank Oz. It's a comedy, so we'll say that. But essentially the plot concerns Bill Murray, who is I don't really want to say he's a hypochondriac, but he basically thinks he has almost every mental health issue that exists, right? And to the point of like even faking Tourette's and stuff. And he's agoraphobic, right? And I think he's claustrophobic too. And he basically can't function. And he finally gets bounced around to this sort of pop psychoanalyst played by Richard Dreyfuss, who's, he's a self-help book guru kind of guy. And they have a session, and I think Dreyfuss kind of quickly sees through Murray that he doesn't have all these things explained. But Dreyfuss ends up going on vacation. Bill Murray, who's extremely needy, ends up following him on vacation and just kind of suffocating his life. And sort of the tilting that you see is that Murray, who can barely function at the beginning, and the doctor kind of swap places through the movie. He drives the doctor kind of crazy, basically. And to the point where I think the doctor ends the movie catatonic, essentially. And Bill Murray ends up being incredibly pleasant and popular. And I think there's some interesting critiques there about psychotherapy, especially kind of more of the pop psychotherapy. But at the same time, if you look at Murray, Murray would not have resolved his concerns all alone, right? If he had just stayed home and talked to no one and done nothing, he would still be the neurotic, non-functional person he was at the beginning of the movie. I think ultimately he's a lonely person, and the relationship that he forges with Richard Dreyfuss, as unwilling as it is by Dreyfuss, which is very funny, but more importantly, the relationship he forms with Dreyfuss's family ultimately gives Bill Murray what he needed, which was friends and just people to interact with. And he realized he can kind of get the attention and the affection he needs in more positive ways. So I think that there's still a lot to be said positively about what therapy can bring you, which is just someone who can listen and someone to be there for you, I think is still well expressed in the movie. But I do like how it paints. I mean, Dreyfuss is not a helpful therapist, right? He's
and not a very nice guy in a lot of ways.
He's not
even
a very nice guy.
before he decides to try to murder his patient.
Yeah. But even before that, right? He doesn't have a very strong relationship with his family. His family more kind of fears him. And Dreyfuss has this poor idea of himself. To him, he's always in control, right? He says things like, I never get angry. And it's like, well, you meet somebody who says they never get angry.
Being angry.
That's not
No, I don't get
healthy.
angry.
Yeah, exactly. It's not healthy to never be angry.
Right.
But then you look, Bill Murray and the family gets a connection because Bill Murray is so much more open and vulnerable, whereas Richard Dreyfuss, who's supposed to, as a therapist, probably should really be a master of those two things, he can't even have a one-on-one serious conversation with his daughter. They have to talk through puppets. Right. And so the two puppets talk to each other because he can't have an actual earnest conversation with her. For some reason, he thinks it's better to go through the proxy.
Well, you can sell puppets too, which is another part of the critique, which is the commodifying of therapy, right? To say that
yes.
His book, he cares way more about his books and different things like that than he does about this new patient. And
his interview with Good Morning America.
Yeah, his TV hit was a big point.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about him going on on Good Morning America. He's going to get interviewed, and of course they incidentally end up interviewing Bill Murray too. Bill Murray ends up getting all the attention.
And it's interesting because one of the little things in there too is if he would only yield. The one of the kind of jokes written into it is that Murray's character is a much better therapist or coach or whatever you want to call him because he's picked up so much over his years of therapy that he'll tell the kid something or the daughter something, or he'll say, or whatever, even Dreyfuss. And if Dreyfuss would have yielded that control that you just mentioned, right, and just gone with it, Ben, Good Morning America would have loved to interview this gushing patient who's like, he's changed my life, and I just met him, and he's wonderful, but he doesn't. He fights it. He fights everything and fights off anything that's healthy just because it comes in a weird package, which I think is an interesting message in the movie.
And if at any point he had really put his foot down about setting boundaries, like he never explicitly tells Bob to go away. No, like he just thinks Bob will figure it out and know the right thing to do, and he can't. But even at the beginning, where Bob is, he's like he can't leave the house without repeating a mantra, and he's a kind of a phony germaphobe. He is incredibly capable because when the doctor goes on vacation, he's not only able to go out and convince a prostitute to call up the operator to find out where the doctor lives. He's able to come in and fake being a cop in order to get them to give him Dreyfuss. So he's incredibly functional and capable when he wants to be. His problems are, I don't want to say, they're all in his head, right? A lot of people do need medication.
It's psychosomatic.
Chemical stuff, but his stuff is really all psychosomatic. And he, at any point under the right environment or stimulus, he could solve his problems. And through this film, he basically does. And so it's a good send up of therapy, but I think there's still a message of how relationships will help you overcome mental health problems, whether you get them from a therapist or you get them from your friends or your family.
Or Bill Murray,
whoever.
If he happens to show up at your
if he shows
family event like he does apparently sometimes.
I love when Bill Murray, like you said, he knows all the stuff. I love when they he tries to commit Bill Murray. And like once he gets home 30 minutes later, the doctors come up and like, come pick him back up. He's not crazy. What are you talking about? He's crazy. He drives back there and he's sitting with the whole staff telling them jokes, right?
Right.
The ink block test. What does this look like? Looks like a naked man. What is this ink block test? Looks like a man and woman fornicating. It was like, oh, I think you're obsessed with sex. Well, you're the one who keeps showing me dirty pictures. And this whole staff loves him.
My favorite thing about What About Bob actually occurs in my own life when people say to, I don't know if all therapists get this, but I've had a lot of people that say, you must hate that movie, right? I think it's because they over-identify with the part that wouldn't be funny in real life, which is the client that, like you say, gets tricks people and pretends to be a cop to track you down on vacation. Yeah, that would be a little scary if that was out of the blue. However, I think what they're really saying is, oh, a patient like that, huh? Or the way that you wouldn't want to have that guy walk in your office. And the funny thing is that it is in real life as a counselor, when I rewatched that movie for the first time after I was a practicing therapist, and I'd seen it when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I guess I probably will have a weird take on this or a different take on this. I didn't actually. The first thing that hit me was when he had Bill Murray transferred to him, is that this guy would actually be kind of fun to work with. It's like, because he gets a call from his friend who, like, apparently Bill Murray drove him right out of the industry. He had to retire rather than work with Bill Murray. And he's like, well, here's this guy, and he's trying to sell it. He's like, he'll come in several times a week, pays cash, pays on time. And, he'll want to talk to you forever. And he thinks you're great. And it's like, well, okay, first of all, that's a pretty good starting point. All of those things. No, but actually, as you put it, he's actually a person that if you, I immediately looked at it as, well, that was really, he shouldn't be creepy, but Richard Dreyfuss's character, I think the worst part of his own character, of his lack of insight, is that he kind of thought he helped in that first encounter. He's like, well, hi, Bob, here's a quick little thing. In 5 minutes, I'm out the door. And he's like, he probably, gun to his head, thought he helped. Right? Yeah. Oh, no, I helped. Yeah, I just gave him that great thing from my book. And I told him to read my book. So, of course, it was helpful.
And bill him for the book, too, he says.
I love, there's a revolutionary new book, and he's scanning.
I love that one.
And it's nothing but his book on every shelf. Yes. But he's still scanning. Aha! He pulls it up.
And it's like, in real life, if you do want to make it real life, obviously the part would be scary. But the real thing of if that was a real guy that walked in my office, I'd have a ball with that guy. We would have a great time talking, because that was a person, as you put it. It's like, I'm afraid of my life. Great. That's a good place to start. You've obviously got a lot to work with. You're a skilled and intelligent and actually warm man. There's a lot you could work with in real life with that person. He wouldn't be really scary at all.
Yeah. Well, Murray says it too, right? When he's faking Tourette's in the beginning. You ever heard of Tourette's? And he starts screaming all the profanity, and Dreyfuss go, why are you doing this? He's like, well, if I fake it, I don't have it. and that's kind of that's the bottom line of all the neuroses he's showing. If he fakes being a germaphobe, he doesn't have it. If he fakes being agoraphobic, claustrophobic, he doesn't have it. All those things that really comes down to where I'm sure a real therapist would help him immediately, probably almost as fast as that.
Well, and it kind of goes back to show that somebody at some level thought that was the client from hell, although they also had to make him appealing enough that it wasn't scary that he was spending the night in the same bedroom as Dreyfuss's son. So they had to write him in a way that was charming too, but once again, people look at something that's different and they say, oh, that's weird because it's different. And it's like, we can usually see past that in real life a lot of times. So this is
one of my favorite movies. Small plug. I will have to plug. I wrote a parody of What About Bob, where essentially the Richard Dreyfuss character meets a flesh-eating alien from space. And it's called What About Blob? And it's a full audio play, and it is out there. And it features Brian Howe and Trace Beaulieu and Frank Conniff from Mystery Science Theater, and it's got a overall great cast. So if you can track it down, that's not just Google it. You'll find the SoundCloud clip of it. What About Blob? I think it's under Dan Dirty Drive-In is the old podcast we aired it on. But yeah, Google it and you should be able to find it.
Should try to put it up in the feed here if you'd I'd have to. Get
Well,
permission
if
from
I
the
was
guy who
allowed
made it.
to, if I was
I'm
allowed
sure
to
someone has
legally,
the rights, right?
yes, if I was allowed to legally own the production, I could put it. But all I own is the text. Unfortunately, it was.
Which we're going to read right now.
We'll read it. Yeah, we'll read it.
Only on Patreon. No, just
and then
kidding.
Dwight will own it.
Yeah, but if you search SoundCloud for "What About Blob,"
Nice.
you should be able to find it.
Great. Awesome. If we perform it now, hopefully this time next year, I'll be in a protracted legal battle with whoever actually has the copyright. So,
Well, no, if we perform it, I own the text. We could perform it legally. I would love
we're
to do
gonna
a
talk about
stage.
this off the line.
I'd love to do a stage performance of it where like it was like a puppet or a bodysuit because during the initial
Because
therapy
then you
session.
could talk to your children through the pup. Oh no, that's not what you're gonna say.
Well, during the initial therapy session, the old man at the beginning of the Blob, it's on his hand. So during the therapy session, the Blob is just on the old man's hand. So the old man's in the therapy session, kind of sitting there and sort of sitting in, because the Blob's attached to his hand, talking.
Gotcha.
So
I like
it'd be great as a hand puppet in the beginning.
Well, I know what I'm doing this afternoon. Now that you've planned it out for me, I'll be Googling that. So cool.
Fantastic.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much for coming on.
A lot of fun.
It's lots of fun. And once again, I mean, really, in the spirit of the way you guys do your show, too, you like to have a lot of fun there. But I believe it really is doing something really productive when people are sitting and listening to it because they're internalizing, once again, a structured form of respectful, fun,
Not always respectful.
even confrontational
Yeah.
dialogue with people who end the program as friends every time, which I think is really
That's
cool.
true.
Yeah.
That's true.
That is true.
So, yeah, but and once again today, coming in with some of these examples of how film can really be quite powerful in the way that we view mental health and in the way that we view life, which I think everybody out there, can find to be the same way. Real quick before we go. Everybody, I always like to ask people who come on the show if they have a favorite charity or nonprofit organization that they would encourage people to be aware of or look into. It doesn't have to have anything to do with what we talked about.
Well, I'll field this one first. I'm a big believer in food banks. I think people can't do anything if they're hungry. Maynard and I live in Connecticut. I give generously to the Connecticut Food Bank. I think they're part of the Feeding America network. So start there. Your state food bank, I would do that.
Right. Thanks.
Yes. Well, thank you. I think that's a great idea for a segment. I love that.
What's Big Ben, guys?
I guess I'll echo that because selfishly, I don't have a lot of charities because every time I research them, it's like, oh, look at this big CEO that owns 40% of the proceeds that they get.
Jeez, man.
So food banks, though, I haven't considered that. That's probably a lot less in that vein. So I'm gonna echo yours, Dylan.
Hey, all right.
I don't know. I know if Defenders of Wildlife, I got a Defenders of Wildlife debit card. And so, every fraction of a penny ends up rolling over to them. And so, I think I like Defenders of Wildlife. It's the one that comes off of the top of my head. I think whenever taxes ask me to give it to someone, I tend to give it to the Defenders of Wildlife. I think they're introducing wolves back out into the wild again. We could use more wolves, I do think. So
Cool.
Yeah, that was a whole project in Colorado. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I would say, along the line.
Doesn't help people. So if it was a mental health thing, it didn't.
The human fund helps
Well,
people.
like I said, it doesn't need to apply to what we're talking about today. It could be anything. I also, if there are charities that people are interested in, you bring up a good point, which is debit cards. I don't know if credit card companies do it, but debit cards do it. And some companies, the nonprofits, I should say, you might want to check with them and ask about different ways because some of them have a link up with Amazon. There's the Amazon buyers thing or Audible or some of those to where it doesn't change you don't have to change your giving or spending habits, but they get a fraction of a penny of everything that you spend anyway if you go under the right browser settings for your Amazon or something like that. So it's always worth checking.
Your debit card will have a picture of a wolf on it.
And your employer.
I get a lot of compliments on it.
Yeah, your employer might match as well. I worked for a company that if you gave to certain charities that fell within that rubric, the food bank being one of them at the time, they would match your donation. So check with your employer as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Very cool. Thank you. Some good insights.
And if you can spare it, the Funky Unky Fund is very well known, very credible.
I already did the Human Fund. It's the same joke.
So tell everybody where they can find Reels of Justice online. Where's the best place to go?
I mean, just any kind of podcast app you have. Easiest thing to do is Google Buzzsprout Reels of Justice, and that's our kind of Buzzsprout homepage. And from there, there's usually a tree link, so it'll take you to the Apple's iTunes, to the Spotify, to the Stitcher. You can just search on those too.
Yeah, we're on Twitter, Facebook, all the.
We have a group on Facebook, the Film Jurors.
Yep, we have a page and a group on Facebook that you could join if you were so inclined. You have our Twitter is Reels of Justice. Our Instagram is Reels of Justice. A lot of pictures of Dylan working out on there.
We're going to rename it.
See some of those.
Change my plans for the
yes, there you go. So yeah, definitely easy way to track it up.
Someone's got to inspire me to do something.
Yeah,
Thank you for listening to the
Hey,
Content Parts
we'll
podcast
talk offline.
To
Get you
listen to more
set up the whole
Content
program.
Parts shows,
Yeah, but I believe we put our
contentarts.com.
we put our feed on like all of our posts on Facebook at least. So whatever podcast app you use, you can take our feed and input it, and it ought to come up. Whether you use Podcast Addict, Pocket Cast, any of those little apps, they should all work pretty good.
Make sure to tweet at me at Break-A-Brain on Twitter if you want to come up with any things I should take on the show for trial again. So anybody out there want me to try any cases, I'm ready.
We've already done What About Bob? I'm sorry, and it was not guilty.
You guys, you guys made me feel complimented and threatened last time when you said, "All right, we're pulling out the real guns next time." I think is what you said, something like that.
You have to go against Big D, Big Dizzles.
Boy, all right, I'm ready.
I know. It's an underwater level.
Faux sizzles, exactly. Yeah,
It's more like the sewer level.
Well,
thanks, guys.
First level.
yeah.
Thank you, Dwight.
Hey, thank you, Dwight. Love it. Great show.